Mr. No Eyes Won't Leave My Son Alone. Written by Kris West, also known as SunHeadPrime on Reddit. Make sure you check out their book, I've Never Told Anyone, a chilling collection of 11 horror short stories that'll keep you up at night. Available on Amazon, link in the description. I heard the footsteps before I saw anything. I had been in the middle of a wonderful dream where John Adams and Dua Lipa rewarded me for my bravery. As Dua was handing me a comically large sack of cash, I felt someone spring into my bed, kneeing me in the groin as they did. I snapped awake and saw my 3-year-old son snuggling between my wife and me. "Hey, buddy," I said, wiping the sleep from my eyes. "He back," my son said, his little voice quivering. "Mr. No Eyes?" my wife asked, waking from her own dreams. "Yes," my son answered. "I sleep with you, please?" My wife sat up and looked over at me. Our bed wasn't small, but some little boy slept like a starfish. If he stayed, I'd have to go to the couch. It was always me who got the heave-ho. I was used to it. I didn't hold a grudge. "Okay," I said. "What do you want to sleep with? Me or—" "Mama," he said, snuggling in close to her. My wife gave me a small smile. "At least you're used to the couch," she said, trying to soften the blow. "Let me go get your stuff, boyo," I said, climbing out of bed. "Get Taco Cat and Big Blue," he said as I walked out. This wasn't the first time he'd come crawling into our bed recently. It had become a semi-regular occurrence since we moved into our new place. I can't say I blamed him. This was a radical shift from what he had been used to. My wife and I had met in college at Boston. We got married and graduated, settled down in the city. Neither of us were from Boston or even the Northeast, but we both fell hard for the city. We had chances to leave, but both decided to stick it out. There are worse places to live. We had a cozy apartment that was perfect for the two of us. We were cramped when my son was born, but it was manageable. Then COVID hit, and it became crystal clear that we had, in fact, outgrown the apartment. I thought we'd be looking for another apartment in the city, but my wife had other thoughts. Without me knowing, she'd been looking for farmland outside the city for quite a while. At first, it started as mindless Instagram scrolling, looking at cute little hobby farms and country-style decor and daydreaming. That quickly gave way to Zillow searches and comparing numbers, and at that point it was just too late. The disease became terminal. "I think we should move to the country." She had a point. The numbers made sense. Both of our jobs were going to be work from home full time. There'd be more space for us to grow a family. We went and saw a few places, but nothing blew up our skirts. I thought that would be the end of the farm hunt until we stumbled across our current home. It was a fixer-upper, to be sure, but it also was the first place that felt like home. Walking across the threshold, we knew this was it. It was a red brick Dutch colonial revival-style house built in the 1880s and retained all the era's charms. It was 2 stories with all the bedrooms on the second floor. The rooms were cozy, to use a realtor parlance, but the big windows made them seem larger. The master bedroom is where the past met modern times. There was a bathroom that had been updated, including a soaking tub. Inside our closet was attic access. I popped up there during the tour, and there wasn't much to it. Perfect for holiday decoration storage, but not much else. The centerpiece of the bottom floor was a large fireplace in the den. I imagined the 3 of us snuggled up together on the couch, watching a movie, warming ourselves with a roasting fire. It was some Norman Rockwell shit, and the more I thought about it, the more I wanted it. My wife's disease had infected me. A month later, we moved. I opened the door to my son's room and immediately noticed the chill. His room was always a bit colder than the rest of the house. I chalked it up to poor insulation, and we gave him Big Blue, a massive sprawling blanket so he could wrap himself up like a burrito and keep warm. I assumed at some point I'd have to look into better insulation, but it was already late fall and the snows would be coming soon. No need to start ripping out the little protection that was already there. I grabbed the blanket and Taco Cat off my son's bed. I was about to head back to my room when I heard what sounded like something moving in his closet. This also wasn't an uncommon occurrence. Old houses settle all the time, so while I was sure that was the case, it still warranted a quick glimpse. Not that I was hoping I would see Mr. No Eyes, but I had to be sure. I deposited the blankets onto the bed and walked over to the closet, pulled down the light cord, and saw nothing but my son's clothes. Just to be safe, I moved him to the side and checked. Nope, no Mr. No Eyes waiting for me. Shut the light off and headed out of the room. The rest of the night was fine. My back was a little achy from sleeping on the sofa, but like my wife said, I had gotten used to it. He usually was the morning after a visit from Mr. No Eyes. Little kids can be very resilient. He came barreling out of my room and jumped on me. I braced for the jump, but he still managed to accidentally ding my balls with his knees. This, sadly, was also typical. If he harbored any thoughts about wanting siblings, he was going to have to remember to take it easy on me. I grimaced, but like the couch, this pain was also routine. "You okay?" "I'm good," I said. "How'd you sleep?" "Good. I like your bed." "I can tell," I said. My wife came walking out of the bedroom yawning, my ancient Nirvana t-shirt, now her favorite sleeping shirt, hanging off her shoulder, and her hair a frazzled mess. She acknowledged me and stretched her arms out wide. "And how did you sleep?" I asked her. "Good. He likes to cuddle." "Maybe one day I'll get to find out." "Aw," she said, crossing to me and kissing the top of my head. "At least you get to spread out." "On the couch?" She smirked and started for the stairs. "You want some coffee?" she asked over her shoulder. "Please." "Dada, you have to work today?" "I have to pretend to work today at the very least," I said. "Why?" "Can we play hide and seek later?" I pretended to mull it over before I gave him a very animated "yes." He squeezed my neck so tight that I feared I might pass out. "We gotta eat breakfast first, though, okay?" "Okay, Dada." I could smell the coffee brewing, which helped me wave away any lingering thoughts of sleep. I looked down at my boy, who was playing with some toys he kept in the loft space upstairs. "Hey, buddy," I said. "What happened last night?" "Mr. No Eyes, it woke me up. He's loud." "What was he saying?" "Nothing. He knocked down my toys." In the closet?" "In my room." "Near your toy box?" "Yep," he said with no concerns. "Well, does he come every night?" "No. He sleeps at night sometimes." "Well, does he ever talk to you?" He stopped playing and looked up at me, but didn't respond immediately. I asked again, and he looked away for a beat before saying, "He said not to tell you or Mama." I felt a shiver run down my spine that wasn't related to the oncoming snows. Kept my poker face, though. No need to scare him any more than he might already be. "Well, you can tell Mama and me anything. You know that, right?" "Yep," he said. "Good," I said. "Does he come to your room, too?" he asked. "I haven't seen him in my room." "He told me he saw you sleeping," he said, playing with a dinosaur, and another shiver and forced smile. Oh, really?
Yeah, he watches you guys too.
Well, how does he watch us if he doesn't have eyes?
He says he can see everything.
Oh, I said. Hey, can I get a hug?
But I already gave you a hug.
I need another one, I said with a smile. He waited a second and then threw himself on me and squeezed tight. You're going to squeeze Dada's head off.
Don't be crazy, Dada,
he said, laughing. I carried him downstairs for breakfast. Before I left the loft, however, I glanced back and checked. Not that I was expecting to see Mr. No Eyes watching us, but I wanted to be sure, just in case. About 3 hours later, my promise came due, and I was roped into playing hide-and-go-seek. My son wasn't a huge fan of hiding, so that task fell to me. I didn't mind. I really enjoyed the hiding aspect of the game. Plus, the new house had a lot of random and unique hidey holes. Since my wife and son teamed up, I knew I could go beyond typical parent hiding spots and really dig in. They went to go count in our bedroom, and I had a free run of the upstairs. That was the one rule. You had to stay upstairs. When he was older, I imagined we'd open up the rest of the house, but we kept the playing field small for now. No matter. There were dozens of good places to hide upstairs. I made my way to my son's room, and he always came here first, and I liked giving him a few easy wins off the bat. Made the game fun for him. I decided to hide under his bed. Moved a few of his toys out of the way, and I slid underneath. It was a tight fit, and I had to suck in my gut a bit and mentally remind myself that I need to hit the gym tomorrow. From where I was laying, I couldn't see anything. When I slid under the bed, I had grabbed a blanket and tried to hide my body. I knew it wouldn't matter. My son would find me. But I wanted him to earn a win, too. Parenting is knowing when to throw in the towel and when to go down swinging. As expected, I heard footsteps coming down the hallway. The game was on. The door slowly creaked open, and they entered the room. I couldn't help but grin, because seeing how excited my son was when he found me made cramming under his bed worth it. The footsteps stopped in front of the bed, and I knew he was coming. I waited, but the two of them never found me. I heard the footsteps slowly walk out of the room and back down the hall. I was puzzled. He always checked under the bed. Plus, he was just so quiet. Thought he was probably going to try and scare me. And he did. He just hadn't realized he had. 5 or so minutes later, my son came bursting back into the room. Instantly, he dropped to his knees and yelled, "Found you, Dada!" I laughed and squeezed myself out from under the bed. As soon as I got out, my son tackled me until I started tickling him. My wife came into the room, and we locked eyes. "There you are," she said. "Here I am," I said, standing up. "You guys didn't see me the first time you came in." And she gave me a look. "He found you right away. Your shoes were sticking out." "What are you talking about?"
What don't you understand about your shoes were sticking out?
"You guys came in a few minutes before that and stood in front of the bed and then left." She shook her head.
No, we went downstairs because we heard you down there. Not supposed to go downstairs, Dada.
"Oh, I didn't go downstairs," I said.
We heard you. I was impressed that you got back up here and under the bed so quickly.
My skin felt prickly. Something had lured my wife and son downstairs and then came looking for me. What the fuck? It suddenly clicked for my wife, too, who had put a hand over her mouth in shock. I just nodded, not wanting to say anything to scare my son. "We'll discuss this when little ears aren't around," she finally said. "Well, should we keep playing?" I asked.
"Yes, stay upstairs,"
my son yelled and ran back to my room to start counting. "I'm not going to hide in here again," I said. "Good idea," she said, heading back to count with my son. A few hours later, my wife and I finally had the conversation when my son was busy eating lunch and watching cartoons.
I hadn't been able to think of anything else since I had first had the revelation, and I was bursting at the seams. I pulled her into the kitchen and unloaded. What the fuck happened? I know what I heard. Me too, she said. I heard you walking down the stairs. I even thought, that jerk's trying to cheat. What did it sound like? Like someone walking downstairs. Then, when we were down there, her voice suddenly caught in her throat. What happened? I heard you whisper my name downstairs, right before I heard you walking back upstairs. I heard my name clear as a bell. That is so fucked up. Tell me about it, she said. Is Mr. No Eyes real? Is that insane to even ask? I don't know. We both had something happen. Maybe it's worth looking into. He can't sleep in the room tonight. No, he shouldn't. I agreed. I'm sorry, she said. I know this puts you out, but I just can't. She started to trail off, and I could see her eyes getting glassy. This whole thing had thrown us all off kilter, but my wife had heard someone call her name. That'd scare anyone. Hey, it's okay. I agree with you. Boyle, stay out of there until we figure out what's happening. Should we call, I don't know, a priest? Will that work if we're not religious? I honestly have no idea. I'll look into it later. Just then, I heard the tiny footfalls of my son walking into the kitchen with his now empty plate. He dropped it into the sink, and I looked down at him and tousled his hair. How was lunch? Good, he said. What was you talking about? Oh, just boring adult stuff, I said. He said he heard you. I felt the air leave the room. I tried to speak, but I couldn't find the words. My wife did. Who hurt us, baby? Mr. No Eyes. Is he down here now? He was. He left. Well, where was he? I asked. Behind you, he said. Can I have a juice box? I whipped my head around and looked for something, but only saw the curtains on the windows. I don't know what I expected to see. My son just laughed at me. Well, he's not there now, Dada. Well, where does he go during the day? My wife asked. The attic, my son said. That's where he lives. Maybe I'll go check it out, I said, dreading doing just that. He not like that, my son said. Me either, I confirmed. Hey, I have an idea, my wife said. Can you draw what Mr. No Eyes looks like? Why? Well, so Dada and I know what he looks like if we see him. Okay. He scampered off to his drawing area to create the only picture he had ever drawn that wouldn't make it up on the fridge. About 10 minutes later, he came running back with what can only be described as terrifying. Mr. No Eyes' head was thin like a pencil with bleach-white skin. True to his name, there were no eyes. He had two mouths, one on top of the other. One smiled and one frowned. He wore what looked like a t-shirt and jeans. I wasn't sure if that's what he really looked like or just what the hands of a 3-year-old were capable of drawing. Well, my wife said, this would scare the shit out of me if I saw it in my bedroom too. He's wearing a t-shirt and jeans, I said. So? I don't know, I always assumed ghosts would be more dapper. Regular people die too. He's a blue-collar ghoul. I laughed. We both did. I folded up the art and put it in my pocket. If I had the power to wish it into the cornfield, I would have. Maybe we should watch a movie. Something happy? Agreed, I said, kissing my wife on the cheek. You want something to eat? She nodded, and went out to corral the wild man to help pick a movie. We settled on an old Disney classic and forgot about Mr. No-Eyes. The rest of the day went off without a hitch. Come bedtime, however, things got a little odd. As discussed, my son would not be sleeping in his room for the foreseeable future, not until we figured out what was going on. I wasn't sure if my room was safer. I assumed this thing could go anywhere, but my boy never freaked out when he was in there. I was hoping that trend continued. We tucked him in our bed and ran through our nighttime routine. He was happy and thrilled to not be in his room. He kept saying it was hard to sleep through the noise. I asked him what noise, and he looked shocked. You don't hear it? Well, hear what, bud? I asked. The buzzing, like bees. It does that when Mr. No-Eyes first shows up. Oh, was all I could muster. Well, you'll be safe in here, okay? My wife said, settling the situation. And if you need anything at all, Dad's just outside the room, okay? He hugged me. Love you, Dada. Love you too, boyo. Within 10 minutes, he was out. My wife and I went downstairs to clean up the kitchen and get in a few episodes of TV before our own beds started calling. As expected, she answered her call first. Oh, I can barely keep my eyes open. I know, I said. You missed me moonwalking a bit ago. No, she smirked. I saw those moves. That's why you're heading to bed? To save you the embarrassment, yes, she said as she stood and kissed the top of my head. Don't be up too late, 'kay? Huh? I won't, I said before adding, need me to walk you up? No, I can handle it. We haven't heard anything. No bees, not yet at least. Don't jinx yourself, she said. Night, baby. Night. I heard her walk up the stairs and walk into our room. She closed the door softly, but I could still hear the click of the latch. I was alone for the first time since I had heard Mr. No-Eyes enter the room while I was under the bed. The thought caused me to shiver, but I wasn't going to let it ruin the rest of my night. I turned on the Dodger game and zoned out. I fell asleep somewhere around the 6th inning. I heard the crack of a solid hit on the screen, which snapped me awake. I flipped off the TV, stood up and stretched, figured it was time for me to hit the hay. I was about to head up the stairs when I noticed my refrigerator door was open. Not just cracked, but wide open. Last night's chicken dinner was sitting out on the counter, too. Hello? I called out, expecting to see my wife making a late-night snack. But no one responded. I detoured from the stairs and headed into the kitchen. There wasn't anyone in there. Puzzled, I put the food back in the fridge and closed the door. From behind me, I heard one of the chairs from my dining room shift on the floor like someone had pulled it out. I cautiously walked over to the room and threw on the light. Sure enough, one of the chairs had been noticeably pulled out. I was beginning to think Mr. No-Eyes just wanted a late-night snack. At least push your chair in, I said out loud. That's when I heard what sounded like white noise emanating from the living room. It started quietly, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder. Within a few seconds, the faint white noise sounded like a swarm of bees. The buzzing was intense and filled the air. Then it went quiet. The buzzing didn't just stop. Every noise stopped. No crickets outside, no hum of the refrigerator, nothing but my shallow breaths and booming heartbeats. The fuck? I muttered. The hair on my arms, sensing something was off before my brain caught up, started to rise. I wasn't alone in the room. I didn't see anything, but I felt, in the animal part of my brain, something was watching me. That's when the whispers started.
I couldn't make out the words, but it was clear. Two different voices were speaking. One was a nasally, high-pitched drawl, and the other was a sonorous low baritone that sounded like someone stuck their finger in a record player, slowing it down. The voices came from seemingly every corner in the room, all at once. Just then, the overhead lights started to flicker until they went out. I stood there not knowing what to do. Normally, even with the lights off, I could kind of see my way around the house. Light pollution being what it is, once my eyes adjusted, I could manage. But at the moment, it was like someone had put a black cloth over my head.
Why are you here?
The high-pitched voice hissed. I froze in place. I had no intention of responding. Without eyes, I imagined they'd use sound to echolocate me or something. I wasn't sure and was grasping at straws, but I needed to try to add logic to this to center me. The fear had cemented my feet to the floor.
You do not belong,
the deeper voice added. That's when the burners on my stove turned on. The 4 flames lit up the corner of the room. They danced, sending eerie projections on the nearby walls. I scanned to see if I saw anything over there, but saw nothing but shadows.
The little one is afraid of you,
the high-pitched voice said. Suddenly there was a flash of light in the far corner of the living room. I shielded my eyes, but before I did, I saw the outline of a spindly figure in the middle of the room. I didn't see enough in the flash, but I did make out one feature. He had no eyes. I started to shake. I thought about my family upstairs and how they were as metaphorically in the dark as I was actually in the dark. I thought about how my son had seen this thing before and was able to function. Was so brave.
but I am not,
the deeper voice said. Then everything went silent again. Flash, flash, flash. In 3 different corners of the bottom floor, there were flashes of some ethereal light. Each time, I caught a glimpse of Mr. No-Eyes, which painted in more of his look. His head was thin and narrow, with several horizontal slices across his scalp. His skin was a pale blue and pulled taut over his eyeless face. His nose was nothing more than a small bump that sat above a small, smiling mouth. Below that was a larger mouth that looked more like a slit throat than anything else. He looked remarkably like my son's drawing. I might have been proud of this boy's burgeoning art skills if I wasn't so worried about dying. There was another flash near me, and I saw that monster turn its head and face me. The smaller mouth frowned, and the larger one flashed a toothy grin. When the lower mouth spoke, blood dripped from the corners of his mouth.
you are not welcome here,
The deep voice said. My legs wobbled under me. Being threatened by a ghost was not as fun as it sounded. My eyes tried to take in everything, but all I could stare at was the oozing blood from the corners of the second mouth. It bubbled when he spoke. Suddenly there was another flash by the stairs, and my jaw dropped. I had seen a bunch of wild shit in the last few minutes, but this took the cake. Some random guy was standing near the stairs. We locked eyes. I had no idea what he was doing, but he seemed to recognize me. Mr. No-Eyes turned to face him. The smaller voice called out,
You all are not welcome here.
"Fuck this," the random guy said, and bolted up the stairs. When he hit the landing, he split down the hallway toward my son's room. I heard his door slam. I was still processing what had just happened when all the lights turned back on, and Mr. No-Eyes was gone. Everything seemed to be back to normal, but I knew that wasn't true. Then I saw a red splotch on the ground in front of me. Then another, and another. I touched my nose and realized the source of the blood was from me. My nose had started bleeding, and I was confused as all get out. I hadn't had a nosebleed since I was a kid. I had no idea why it had started bleeding. I pinched the bridge of my nose to try to stop the bleeding. I knew I needed to get upstairs and figure out who the hell that guy was, but I had to staunch this flow. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. I kept muttering, "Clot already," hoping my blood would hear my prayers and act accordingly. That's not what happened. Instead, with my head thrown back, I heard the high-pitched voice whisper into my ear,
"You will die here."
That got me moving. Blood streaming from my nostrils or not, I tore ass up the stairs. I looked over at my son's room, but I knew I needed to get my family to safety. Whatever Mr. No-Eyes was, he wasn't playing around anymore. I dashed into my bedroom, and my wife shot up like a volcanic eruption. "What's wrong?" she said, the sleep still coursing through her brain. "We gotta go, now." "What's the matter?" "Mr. No-Eyes, he's here." She snapped into action. What happened?" "He threatened us, all of us." You saw him?" "I saw so much more than him," I said, tossing shoes to my wife. "Get to the car with the boy. I'll be right behind you." I want to stay with you." "No, get him to the car." Just then my son woke up, rubbed his eyes, and stood up. "It morning time?" "Nobody," I said, trying my best to sound cheerful. "We're going to go to the car for a little ride, though." My wife came over to me. She saw how wild my eyes looked and blood in my nose. "Are you okay?" "I will be when we get the fuck out of here," I said. "You ready?" She nodded and scooped up our son. He clung tightly to her as we made our way toward the door. Before we left, I turned back to her and said, "If you see anything, just rush right past it, okay? Grab the keys by the door and get to the car as soon as possible. Got me?" She nodded yes and hugged our son a bit tighter. I turned to grab the handle when I heard my son say, "What are we doing in Mama and Dada's closet?" We all turned around to see a face in the attic entry looking down at us. My wife screamed, at first assuming it was Mr. No-Eyes, but it wasn't. It was the stranger I had saw earlier. He ripped open the attic opening and started climbing down. "Let's go," I said, kicking my door open and guiding my wife and son down the hallway toward the stairwell. Behind us I could hear the stranger scrambling out of the attic. I didn't know what he had planned or what would happen if he caught us, and I wasn't going to find out. The light started flickering right before we took our first step on the stairs. My son pointed toward his room. "Run, Mama! Mr. No-Eyes sees you!" "The fuck?" my wife yelled, trying to turn around and get a glimpse. I blocked her view and coaxed her down the stairs. "Just go!" I yelled as we stomped down the stairs. The door to our bedroom opened up and the stranger came running out. He looked at us, but then he froze in his place. "No! No!" he screamed and ran back into our room. The lights went out in our house again just as our shoes hit the first floor. We heard the stranger struggling to get back into the attic and stopped to look up. There was a flash of light, and my wife finally saw Mr. No-Eyes' face. "That's unholy," she mumbled in amazement. "I don't like Mr. No-Eyes," my son added. The creature floated towards the room and passed through the door without opening it. We heard the stranger scream again. He was afraid for his life. From the ground, we heard him moving above us in an area we didn't know had attic space. My wife looked at me, confused. "I think the realtor lied to us about the size of the attic," is what I had managed to say. There was a cracking sound above us, and I knew what would happen. I pushed my family back as the ceiling over us gave way. The stranger fell nearly 20 feet and hit the ground with a sickening crack. His left femur was sticking out of his thigh. Some of his blood had landed on my face. He screamed in pain like nothing I had heard before. I glanced up and watched as Mr. No-Eyes' head came into view from the new hole in the ceiling. His mouth smiled and fresh blood bubbled at the corners.
You are all destined for the black,
the lower mouth said. Then we heard the buzzing of the bees again. The noise filled the room. My wife and child were crying. I pushed them out the front door and told them to start the car. Mr. No-Eyes gripped the whole sides and slowly started snaking himself down toward the ground. He was planning to fall onto us like a drop of water from a leaky faucet. I wanted to run, needed to, but the stranger and I locked eyes. He was scared, and he didn't need to say a word for me to read his look. Please help me, or I'm gonna die. I looked up, and the maniacal smiles from the creature slowly lowering itself closer to us, and then over to the painful stranger, bleeding from a torn open thigh. My humanity won out. I ran over and helped the stranger up. He screamed in pain, but I told him to shut the fuck up and move, or I'd leave him there. Busted leg or not, the stranger hobbled at a pace I didn't think possible. As soon as we got to the front door, we heard a loud thump as Mr. No-Eyes hit the floor.
The black awaits,
The higher-pitched voice said before both mouths started laughing. So does my Kia Sedona, I said, wrenching open the door. The stranger and I hobbled out the front door and into the waiting car. My wife was screaming for me to hurry. I got the stranger into the back seat before rushing around the car and sliding into my seat. Drive! As I said it, Mr. No-Eyes stood in our doorway and watched us. Suddenly, several flames erupted near the car. My son started crying. My wife looked comatose. I could feel my heart beating so hard I was afraid it would burst out of me. Mr. No-Eyes raised his arms. They disappeared in the spreading blackness. The blackness didn't stop with his arms. Before too long, Mr. No-Eyes himself was lost to the spreading void. I noticed the shadows of the trees around our house started to bend and bleed into the spreading darkness, like they were giving more strength to the void. Drive! I yelled again to my stunned wife, touching her arm as I did. She snapped out of her stupor and put the car into drive. As she slammed on the pedal, the car fishtailed before the rubber finally caught. I looked back, and our house had been completely enveloped into the void. As we turned down the street, I heard both voices laughing. I didn't dare turn around to find out if he was behind us. I trusted my gut that he wasn't. We dropped off the stranger at the hospital, and I finally got some information out of him. Turns out he was a squatter living in the house before we bought it. Worse, he was an obsessive paranormal fan who had learned about our house's history online and became determined to live there and see if he could experience anything. He did. He said he hadn't planned on staying after we bought the house, but he was pretty dug in by then. The house, he told me, had a few human-sized access points that weren't listed on any blueprints or were something you wouldn't see if you didn't know where to look. He had found them and taken advantage. Why the fuck did you stay? I asked him later. I was trying to prove something was up there and wasn't ready to leave. Thought if I was quiet, you'd never notice. I was done, I'd leave. But then your son caught me a few times. How did he catch you? Well, there's an attic entry in his closet. You didn't know? No, I said, stunned. Why were you going into his room? Well, normally he's a deep sleeper. He usually didn't hear me climb down, but every once in a while he'd spot me. When he did, He trailed off. I wanted to strangle this guy, but also wanted to hear what he had to say. Wanting to murder someone and hearing information they needed to tell you is a hard line to walk, but I was a regular Philippe Petit at this point. You what? I pressed through gritted teeth. I told him about Mr. No Eyes. You what? I said, ready to rip this guy's head off. I said I was protecting him from Mr. No Eyes so he wouldn't tell you guys about me. The fuck? Look, I know it was wrong. I wanted to leave, but I still needed proof. Look, you have to know I didn't want to put you or your family in danger, ever. Funny fucking way of showing it. I know, I was obsessed, though. I wanted to get something, so I decided to speed up the process. How? He looked away, ashamed. I started purposefully agitating Mr. No Eyes. It worked. Up to that point, I had considered not saying anything to the authorities. He'd need to leave and never come back. I assumed he'd take the offer as he was in traction for his leg. The recovery was going to be long and painful, but when he told me what he had done, my good nature gave way. I pressed charges. He's awaiting trial as I write this. Another thing I've since found out is that our house is quite the hotspot for paranormal comings and goings. There's a litany of stories about the farmhouse online. I just never thought to look. Who Googles the history of their house before they buy it? I'd seen it, been inside it, felt the good vibes. It seemed like the perfect fit. When I relayed this to our realtor, she was stunned. She'd never heard anything about this and swears up and down she would have mentioned it if she had. I'm inclined to believe her, but I have my doubts. Massachusetts is one of the few states where you don't have to mention paranormal issues to a prospective buyer. After a big protest, I did send my wife and son to go and stay with her mom for a few weeks, just until I could get things settled down at the house. I went to a local Catholic church and told a priest. A few phone calls later, he put me in touch with a spiritual fixer that could help. The church vouched for him, but wouldn't publicly do so. Not a surprising stance for the church to take considering its past. When we arrived at the house, I was surprised to see it still standing. The inky black void that had enveloped the building was gone. Everything on the outside looked normal. The inside, however, that was a different story. Besides the gaping hole in my ceiling, all my furniture had been stacked in the middle of the living room. It was like a Jenga tower made of IKEA. I was afraid to touch it, worried it'd crush me if I did. This is not a good sign, the fixer said. I smirked. You're right. No human being would stack books like this. Is there a stack of books, too? The fixer asked, looking around the room while failing to spot my reference. No, I said sheepishly. I decided just to hang back and let this guy do his thing. About an hour later, he returned and told me that something dark was still here. I said I wasn't surprised, and he told me he needed to do some rituals. Said it'd be best if I wasn't there. I came back 3 hours later, and the fixer was sitting outside my house. He looked emotionally and physically drained. He was smoking a cigarette and barely acknowledged my presence. So, how'd it go? I asked. I've never dealt with anything like that before. Is it gone? I asked. He stubbed out his smoke and looked up at me. It's gone. For now. What the hell does that mean? Whatever that guy did, he opened up some portal or something in there. It's like a light in the dark to these things. They'll head for it eventually, but for now, the light's been dimmed. Can we close the portal or whatever? I'll have to ask people above me if they can help. So what, I just wait for some other ghoul to arrive in the meantime? Well, if it does, he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a business card, call me. I'll send it back to where it came from. Well, what about the black? I asked. Well, what was that? That? That is something I've never heard of before. I'm going to have to ask around. This wasn't the response I was hoping to hear. So should we stay here or what? He nodded. This is your home. Don't give 'em an inch. You're safe for now, but there's always a chance it can come back. It may not. Who knows? If it does, though, you know what to do. Run away and call the Pope? He smiled. We might even need to go over his head. I laughed and drove the guy home. About a week later, we moved back into the house, and so far, everything's gone back to normal. I went up in the attic and cleaned out the mess the squatter had left, patched a hole in my ceiling. My son hasn't had a bad dream since. Mr. No-Eyes has stayed far away. I've settled into a new routine. Every night around sunset, I make myself a cocktail and walk the property around the house. I've dubbed it my booze patrol. I'm not sure what I'm looking for or what I'd do if I saw something, but it helps me feel secure. I'm about to head out now. I'm only hesitating because earlier when I was taking out the garbage, I heard what sounded like bees buzzing around the tree line. Odds are it was simply bees looking to find a spot to start a new hive, but considering the recent past, I'm being more cautious. I'm not going to let Mr. No-Eyes come walking back into this place without a fight. This is my house, my land. I'll fight it until I can't. All that being said, I really do miss our old apartment in Boston.
Thank you for being a part of this living nightmare. We hope to disturb you again soon.